This video will show how you can take an existing character and map it to a Xarkin model and skeleton for retargeting and motion generation. We're going to use Blender to import the T-pose of a Mixamo character and then map this character to the skeleton in a Xarkin model. We'll then work with Xarkin to apply some motion to this character while making a few subtle adjustments along the way. This will show the nuance Xarkin can bring to 3D character motion. Finally, we're going to take this motion and apply it back to our character back in Blender. From the Mixamo site, we'll go look at some characters, and looking at these characters, I've chosen a character called Abe. We'll download Abe in FBX format. We'll go into Blender, we'll import that FBX file. First, what we're going to do is we'll make sure we'll set up automatic bone orientation. Then we'll go to the folder that contains Abe, and we'll bring him in. And now we've got Abe on the stage. Pivot, go in, and now let's launch the Xarkin editor. Next, we'll map the character on our way to Xarkin Studio. We can see the skeleton of the character we imported, transparent, behind the skeleton of the Xarkin topology, which is humanoid in this case. Holding the left mouse button will allow us to rotate this image to make sure we match up perfectly. And probably the first thing to do here is we'll start to hide some of the items that are in the character. We've got a filter at the top that will identify any segment inside the original skeleton that has the word hand in it. And other than the left hand and the right hand, we're going to hide all those other segments as they aren't necessary for the character motion that Xarkin supports. So we'll tick all those boxes off. And we can see the Mixamo rig, left hand, index 1, and so on. And it takes a few seconds, but we'll get them all off. As we're doing this, you'll see that it's disappearing on the screen on the left. Next we'll go after the toes. If I rotate around, holding down that left mouse button, I can see the toes disappearing now. We've got them off the Mixamo rig. And I'm going to come back in a little while and I'm going to deal with the one that I've obviously missed. It's down there someplace. Let's go to the top and we'll start. There's an extra head segment in the Mixamo model, and we'll get rid of the top head segment there. Okay, there we go. Let's go get rid of that right hand thumb. I must have missed ticking that. There we go. Now that I've hidden things I don't really want to look at, I can select and drag the various pins that will make up the joints of the segments in the Xarkin skeleton, and I can reposition them to match the character. So as I'm doing this, if I look in the upper right, I can see the root node in Xarkin is the Mixamo rig hips, and every time I pin one, it starts to build that list for me. Xarkin actually will make sure that you do things in a reasonable order so that you don't have to redo work. So you can't actually pin something to the original skeleton unless it's in the right order in terms of the hierarchy of the skeleton itself. So in a couple minutes I've managed to map the Xarkin skeleton to the Mixamo rig, and the next thing to do is just simply give it a name, because I don't want to have to go through this again. So I'm just going to call this Old Abe. I'm going to add that mapping and we'll save that. And now that I'm ready to go, I'll click Done to go into the editor. Having mapped the character and now having combined the two skeletons, we'll go right into Xarkin Studio. The first thing I'm going to do here is apply some motion to this character. I'll go up to the cloud. I'll load an action from the cloud. This will bring up a dialog box. I want to have a run. I want to repeat that for 3 cycles. It'll be a run cycle. There'll be no jump or left turn or any of those things. And this is a replacement for what's on the stage. And I want it to replace everything in the interval. And it's just a raw replacement. It's just going to insert motion for that character on the stage with no residual T-pose there. So when I click OK, I'm now back on the stage, and now I can see the character running. Once the character is running, I can have them run in place. I can have them go through a full cycle. I could zoom out a bit so I get a better display. I could have them at half speed. My preference for working is always just to pin their motion and work from there. As well, I can see the mapping at any point in time in the motion by going to the mapping tab up here and showing the mapping. So I'll refresh, and now I can see that mapping, and I can make it more solid or I can make it more transparent. It's my choice as to how I want to apply that. If I want to see all those hidden segments on Ape, I can see the hidden segments as well. And that can be important for understanding what the Xarkin motion is going to do for your character back in Blender. Now that we've got the character running, I'm going to go to the interval tab, and the interval being from the start to the finish, all 3 run cycles. And I'm going to make a subtle change here. I'm going to pitch the head forward by 5 degrees. If I hold the mouse and look over here, I can see that happening. So the head has a slight pitch to it, but I'm going to go to the cycle tab, and through each cycle I'm going to pitch the head 6 degrees forward. And I'm also going to put a second pitch in of 4 degrees, and I'm going to apply that. And now we can see a subtle motion in the head, and we can see the entire body has changed with that pitch. If I want to align it back between the 2 skeletons in the mapping, I can simply hit refresh, and now I have our character moving with a slight head bob. Having done this, I've got enough motion here that this is what I want to show back in Blender. I can now save that as a mapped motion generation file. And this is just really replacement for one I already have. I'll just call it Abe Simple Run Xmogen. We'll replace that one. So we've got a simple run there for Abe, and this completes this part of the demo. Having created a Xarkin motion generation file, we can now import that motion back onto our character in Blender. I'll select the character first. We'll import. And it was called Simple Run. We'll load this. And this will take a few seconds while Xarkin's motion data is populated into Blender. Now we have our character. Now it's centered the character, but you already remember the location. We'll just go up 3.8, and that'll be about where it was. There we go. And maybe move them back a bit. We'll change the frames to the 60 that's sitting in the motion file. And then we'll hit play. In the space of a few minutes, we've been able to import a character from Mixamo, put that on the Blender stage, launch Xarkin Studio from Blender, map the character to the Xarkin humanoid topology that it most closely matches, start Xarkin Studio, create motion for that character, make a few parameterized changes so that we get the little head bob and Abe running along here, and then bring that motion back into Blender. This concludes our demonstration of how to retarget your character for use within Xarkin Studio. The next video in this series, Xarkin Studio, will provide more in-depth demonstration of Xarkin retargeting and motion generation capabilities. Thank you for watching.